Welcome, everyone, to the fifth in a series of 5 webinars focused on the National Workforce Strategic Plan. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll just allow everyone a minute or so to get into the group. And hopefully wherever you're coming in from today, the weather is good. I know in Ottawa, where I'm from, we're having a bit of a break from some pretty nasty heat, so that's a good thing as well. So I know people will join as we move along here, but just to keep us on track and on schedule, as I mentioned, I am calling in from Ottawa, but we do acknowledge that Canada is home of more than 600 First Nations who've governed these lands since the beginning of time. Our office acknowledges that we work throughout the lands of the First Nations, and our office is located on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. So for those of you that aren't aware of who CAHRC is, we're the Canadian Agriculture Human Resource Council, and our organization is a national nonprofit that works with industry across Canada to look at workforce issues and HR issues and ensure that the agriculture and agri-food sector has the workforce that they need now and into the future. So the National Workforce Strategic Plan for Agriculture and Food and Beverage Manufacturing has been underway for about 4 years now. It has been an initiative that we are very pleased to have supported from the beginning from the Canadian Federation of Agriculture and Food and Beverage Canada. And the initiative really is looking at a way to bring industry together to take a look at workforce issues that have been a challenge for quite some time now, and how we can work together to address these challenges so that we're not continuing to see increasing labor shortages and making sure that we are able to have that workforce now into the future with the right skill set and to meet the productivity and efficiencies of the industry as well. So with the National Workforce Strategic Plan, as I mentioned, we started about 4 years ago. We brought industry together from across Canada, across the entire value chain, to take a look at what could be a really big issue and to put some frame around it and some to package it in a way that we felt we could really start to take action. And you'll see, for those of you that may not have seen this pie chart before, we have organized things in a way that we're able to break it down and move forward. So automation and technology, people and workplace culture, perceptions and awareness, skill development, immigration and foreign workers, with of course some overlying themes around infrastructure, inclusion, Indigenous engagement and reconciliation, competitiveness and profitability, and data. This work has, been moving forward with the help and great dedication of close to 100 industry volunteers that have been working through working groups organized by these pillars since the beginning, since the 4-year start date. And this really is an initiative that's an evergreen, moving forward initiative. It is not a report that ends up on a shelf. It is something that we are working forward to make progress, to monitor and measure our progress, and to continue moving forward with action. In the first phase, we did quite a bit of quite a bit of research. The working groups identified their, short, medium, and long-term goals, and also identified some information gaps and data gaps. We were able to fill quite a bit of those data gaps in the first phase. Now we're working through making sure that knowledge of that research is out there, but also monitoring where we go from here. And so, as I said, we continue to move this forward. It is a great collaboration across industry with a number of players at the table, always room for more players to come and to get involved. The real objective is to focus on collaboration, and amplifying what's working, amplifying who's doing what, reducing duplication, and making sure that as an industry, we have that workforce that we need going forward. So today, joining me on this webinar is Christina Farrell, who's the CEO of Food and Beverage Canada, and Brody Berrigan, who's the Senior Director of Government Relations and Foreign Policy with CFA. As I mentioned, these two organizations have been essential in bringing together the entire value chain and moving this forward, and their leadership in this area is greatly appreciated and has really ensured that we have been able to bring this initiative to light and to make a lot of progress in the 4 years we've had it underway. So as you know, registering for this webinar, we had a summit 2 weeks ago in Toronto to bring together a lot of these industry leaders and talk about some of the research findings, some of the main themes that we had heard over the first phase of this work. There was around 100 sector leaders that came together through a 2-day event where we really focused on collaboration, innovation, and ensuring that the industry has that resilience moving forward. And the key outcomes was to have those shared priorities, insights, and actions. The objectives of this summit were to mobilize workforce research to see how we can scale some of these solutions to address the workforce gaps. A lot of our research that we did in phase one really pointed towards technology and AI adoption, different ways that we can support industry in that adoption, some of the barriers that might be there, and ensuring again that the skills are there for the workforce to be able to support that adoption quickly. We also had a lot of conversation around HR practices and that attraction and retention piece, and then again, of course, strengthening that cross-sectoral collaboration. There's no one organization or no one group that's going to be able to move the workforce issues forward. We are much stronger working together and amplifying each other's work and finding opportunities to collaborate and support to move this forward. Just to give you a sense of the agenda, the first day really focused on setting the stage for resilience and growth, and the second stage was on mobilizing action and building momentum. From that first phase, some of the themes of discussion were around declining competitiveness that's being felt across the agriculture and agri-food industry, lots of conversation around the labor and skills shortages and how we could better align those. We heard about some of the geopolitical side of things and the global market risks that we're facing as an industry. We also talked about some of the things contributing to slow innovation adoption, and of course, the shifting federal policy that we're all working within. We had great presentations from AAFC, Farm Credit Canada, CAPI, CFIN, and CANE all helped really set that stage for conversation and share some knowledge that they have from their own perspectives as well. We had panel discussions and really focused again on that need for a lot of structural investment and alignment across the industry to move us forward. Day two was really setting the stage for resilience and growth. So looking at things like technology, increasing productivity, where our data gaps might be, the role that work integrated learning can play, the move to having increasing inclusion and equity across the workforce, and where employers can really play a role in that leadership in these areas. Again, we had some great panels and conversations with folks from Careers Now, CWIL, Access Employment, the University of Waterloo. There was a number of speakers that talked about some of the great work they're doing. And again, that amplifying of messages of what's out there already, how we can work together and build on that as well. So the takeaways from the summit were really focused on the AI in the workforce, which again was a bit of a focus theme that we had for the summit, but ways that we can have that workforce that can support rapid adoption of AI. There was also conversations around small and medium-sized enterprises and rural areas and the risk of being left behind. Digital literacy is essential, and there was lots of conversation, and certainly through our research as well, where supporting upskilling, reskilling of our current workforce and attracting in the right folks with the right skills going forward is going to help address some of these adoption and readiness situations. We also highlighted the skills bridge model, and some other examples of how you can do that upskilling. So moving forward, out of the summit, the main themes were really focused on the Canadian agriculture and agri-food sector having investing in the people and technology that's going to really move the sector forward. The essential nature of upskilling at all levels to support this, inclusion being a big part of where and how we move forward with our workforce, always measuring our data in our progress and seeing where we still need to do work, and collaboration is non-negotiable. And that's certainly the main theme around the National Workforce Strategic Plan. Some other areas that we looked at more on what we can do through our initiative is ensure that we implement the actions through measurable frameworks, which has always been a mainstay of this initiative, and is one of the reasons we constantly are going back to what those actions are and the progress that we're being made, that we're making, and also that we are keeping those actions in line with the ever-changing environment that we all work within. Making sure that we're able to share information with funding organizations and policymakers, that we can have a great environment that supports skill development priorities that have been outlined, and continuing to really bring to the table employers, educators, and policymakers into the same room where we can share information and really, again, support that collaboration across all stakeholder groups. So that gives you a bit of an overview of the summit and some of the conversations and discussions and main themes that came out. I'm going to turn it over now to our panelists that are with us today as well, Christina and Brody. We were very thankful again to have the support from your organizations, but then also to have you both attend the summit and play very important roles in the conversations and moving that agenda forward. So I thought we would just start off by maybe hearing from each of you. I've given kind of our summary and overview, but it would be great to hear each of your perspectives on the clear takeaways, recommendations from the summit, and where we can focus going forward. So Christina, I'll start with you.
So I unfortunately was only there on the first day, but it was a great day, very informative. What I found particularly interesting is in the afternoon we did have a session with stakeholders in other industries, and I thought it was certainly insightful to see that other industries are battling with some of the same challenges that we're battling with. Obviously, it has different implications. We're unique in that at the end of the day, if we can't staff up, if we don't have people with the right skills, it impacts food security. But it was interesting to hear that other industries are battling with things like AI. What does it mean for its workforce? What does it mean in terms of making sure that employers are ready to embrace new innovations, new AI, automation, but also how we make sure that we have workforces that are skilled and can upskill to meet those new challenges. And that's not just something that we're facing as an industry. And I think that there are some learnings that we can take and adapt even into our strategic plan from those other industries as well, which was great.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. And I think that's one of the key things is that although we face a lot of challenges in agriculture, we're not alone. And we are also facing competition as we try to put our strategies in place to attract that and retain that workforce. We're facing the, you know, friendly competition, I guess, from other sectors as well that are facing similar challenges and trying to implement similar strategies as well. Brody, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Jen and Christina. So the CFA, I know, Jen, you provided a bit of an introduction, but just maybe to elaborate a little bit on who we are for those who may or may not be aware. CFA is Canada's largest general farm organization. We represent about 190,000 farmers and farm families across the country. Our members include all of the provincial and territorial general farm organizations, as well as a number of national commodity associations. So we really come at this issue from the perspective of producers, primary producers, farmers. And this is a recurring topic that we hear again and again. I would say one of the issues that came up on the margins of the discussion was really, the sensitivity around the use of the temporary foreign worker program. It's a program that is absolutely critical for so many of our producers across the country. Some sectors and commodities more than others. You can think of fruit and vegetable in particular, but there are a number. And for us in the agriculture sector, the conversation tends to get dominated by the temporary foreign worker program. And I think that one of the reasons why we've signed on to be a partner in the National Workforce Strategic Plan with, Food and Beverage Canada and a number of other sort of partners who sit around the table is really to try and broaden that conversation beyond the temporary foreign worker program as the only solution to those labor force needs in the agriculture sector. We really want to reframe that discussion to make it about not just having access to that migrant workforce, which is critical. I do not want to undermine or dismiss that, but to also talk about, how are we actually embedding and taking advantage of technology and innovation, among other things. It's also about, attracting young people into the sector so that they want careers in agriculture, supporting skills development. There are a number of different, obviously, planks in the Workforce Strategic Plan. But the theme of this discussion was really around that technology and innovation. And we had some great discussions on the first day, presentations, that set the stage. So what is the political sort of context and environment right now that is driving some of the conversations around competitiveness and productivity and more of an economic focus and efficiency. But at the same time, we heard from Farm Credit Canada that our agricultural productivity growth has been stagnating substantially over the past several decades. So we peaked about 20 years ago or so at about 2% ag productivity growth, if memory serves. And we're down closer to 1%, I think, right now, and projected to go even lower over the next decade or so. So we've kind of got this clear mandate to grow, to innovate, and to adapt, but our productivity trend line trajectory is heading in the wrong direction. So for me, one of the big takeaways of this summit was that technology alone is not enough, and that we really need to invest in the people, the skills, the training, and the leadership. That was another key theme that came out, to bridge this level of ambition that has been set and the sort of structural challenges that we're facing from a productivity perspective. So workforce development issues can't be a sidelined conversation in a new Carney government mandate, which I fear up to this point it may have been. And so, part of our challenge, part of what we need to do in taking up that mantle is try and mainstream some of these conversations into the current government agenda and embed them into discussions around nation building infrastructure products and enhancing productivity as one of those foundational sort of building blocks in realizing that outcome. We're probably going to talk about some of the key directions and outcomes later, Jen, so I can keep my powder dry for that. But those were some of my kind of initial takeaways, I would say, from the summit, which was 2 weeks ago, right? So not that long ago, but a lot has happened since then, hasn't it? So we've had a G7. We had President Trump in town. We also have a prime minister who's made some pretty ambitious commitments around NATO defense spending. And if you think that doesn't implicate the agriculture sector, you can forget about it, because it absolutely will. That is going to suck up a lot of resources, and so we need to keep that in mind as well when we're talking about directions and how to move forward here. Anyway.
Yeah, and thank you both for your perspectives. I think that really they both really highlight some of the conversations and some of that. Often I would say even when we started this workforce strategic plan, we started with putting this model together, and when we first brought that model out, I know I heard from a lot of people of like, why are you making it so complicated? Like, just put out a good attraction, start advertising downtown Toronto and raise awareness about jobs and we'll be good. Or, just push forward automation, bring in the robots, and there's your solution to your shortages. And we know that it's not that simple. And I think everyone around the table bringing this initiative to life and really moving forward in the avenues and the pillars of and focus that we have of really demonstrated the importance of each of these pieces, and that not one piece, not one organization, not one solution is going to get us to where we need to go. And I think it is also very important, as you mentioned, Brody, that and as Christina mentioned too, with first off, we know other industries are facing shortages and they're doing all sorts of things. We're competing already. Not only have we had now this major investment announcement in defense spending, but before that, we had a major announcement of focus on housing shortages and addressing those shortages. Those are all very, very valid and very important priorities for the government. However, when we look at a Canadian workforce that already has a number of shortages and agriculture fitting in that, and food and beverage manufacturing fitting in that, competing even more for a smaller workforce, dollars into those areas, as you mentioned, Brody, are going to draw or have the potential to draw away our current workforce and create more challenges for attracting that workforce in our sectors. Provide food security. We provide, not just for Canada, but for the world. Domestic food supply, domestic food production is extremely important. The economic benefits that our industries bring to the Canadian economy are huge. So we need to ensure that we continue to very strongly work towards that workforce development. Without the people, we can't implement technology. Without the people, we can't produce our food, manufacture our food. So we need the people with the right skills, but regardless, we always need the people. And so with thinking about that and thinking about, you've both been with the Workforce Strategic Plan for some time now. Where do you see the NWSP initiative taking action to match some of these recommendations and takeaways? Christina?
I'm happy to jump in. I think we see that there's a big emphasis in the recommendations on employers. So, work integrated learning, employer engagement. So, I think there will be a role for us to play in how do we support employers in doing that, making sure that no one gets left behind. We talked about that a lot too, in terms of even when we talk about things like AI adoption, we want to make sure that some of those rural communities that smaller players don't get left behind both on the agriculture as well as the food and beverage manufacturing side as well. I also think that now there's a role for organizations like Food and Beverage Canada and the Canadian Federation of Agriculture to do some of the advocacy around the recommendations that we've made, recognizing that we did this with industry consultation, with industry input. We're not simply going to the federal government, as Brody pointed out, to say the TFW program isn't working for us, fix it. We're saying here's where our challenges are in securing a stable workforce, thinking about today, but also 5 years from now. Here's our recommendations to the government, and how can we work with the government to make sure that we're in a better place 5 years from now than we are right now, and that we don't go back to a case where we are aggressively asking for changes to the TFW program because it's our only avenue for labor. How do we make sure we have a stable domestic labor force and that we're not always feeling that other industries are being perhaps prioritized, and that has an impact on us as well, and how we are filling the gaps where needed with that temporary workforce, but doing so in a way that makes more sense for the realities of industries that are contributing to food security.
Yeah. Excellent. Brody, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so it's an obvious question, but maybe not necessarily a super obvious answer. However, what I would say is the overall tone I think that we are getting from this government right now is one of ambition and focus. And so I think that's potentially a signal that we might want to follow even in the way that we're organizing ourselves in implementing the priorities of the National Workforce Strategic Plan. So figuring out where we need to be ambitious and then focusing. And so the few areas which I will absolutely build off of what Christina was saying, because I agree with her, are I think that there is an important role that that CAHRC and its partners and other partner organizations can play as a convener, because we do need to build consensus, I think, in some of our advocacy and recommendations. You know, as a staff member in an organization that has a very diverse membership, you know, it's become all too real to us, and I think a lot of organizations like ours that are national in scope face a similar sort of dynamic, that there are a lot of players in the ecosystem. And when you are the government and you have a diverse set of stakeholders who are calling for different things, it's very easy to do nothing. And so one of the things that we should be continuing to push through, you know, our workforce strategic plan and the partners who are around the table is building consensus around those core recommendations. So that's the focus sort of theme. Some of the key areas where that came out to me as priority for focus, like thematically, were, as Christina was saying, strengthening HR capacity for employers. Like that came up again and again and again in panel after panel. And so I think that there's a clear need out there in the sector to support our employer community in building the HR capacity to bridge the technology and the innovation solutions with the access to a labor pool that is going to increasingly need to rely on those enabling technologies to drive our productivity growth. The other sort of things I would say, which are very much aligned with that sort of convening and coordination function, is building awareness across the sector in our advocacy. So I think there were also a number of strong signals around the need to be inclusive, and so I think that the bigger the tent we can build, and raise awareness about some of the challenges that employers are facing and some of the potential solutions and tools that we have at our disposal to address them, is going to also need to be a key priority. So just to summarize, I would say focus our convening power to drive consensus in our recommendations, a real sort of focus on HR capacity in particular as a key area, a gap, I guess I would say, and building awareness and strengthening our advocacy around that are some of the priority areas that jumped out for me.
Great, excellent. And maybe building on that capacity building and the advocacy side, Brody, we'll start with you this time. Where do you think some focus on policy could be? And how can this work inform that policy in a way that can help move some of these priorities forward?
Well, I think a big part of it is linked to what I was saying earlier around finding a hook. So this new federal government has been very clear with their sort of one mandate, and driving towards sort of, you know, a core set of priorities. And they've outlined 7 from what I recall in that kind of one mandate letter that went out to the entire cabinet a few weeks ago. I think we need to find our hook in some of those core government priorities. And then you need to build skills development and workforce development into the conversation around some of those specific issues. So like I referenced, nation building infrastructure projects are a big one. You know, understanding what the workforce needs are and will need to be to meet the demand to implement those national scale nation building projects. That is just one area that jumps out to me, but you know, another might be related to, you know, the emphasis on internal trade and breaking down internal trade barriers and sort of supporting that government priority from a workforce development perspective. Like what are the sort of training needs in fostering, you know, cross-border certifications, facilitating that from a workforce development perspective, I think will be really critical. So I think the one key lesson for me is understanding how your priorities align with the bigger picture government priorities, and then using that as a way to enter into those discussions to tell your story and how it sort of is a critical part of that bigger puzzle.
Mm-hmm. I think that makes a lot of sense. And certainly, around the skills development working group table, um, we hear a lot or have heard a lot over the 4 years around um, how do we coordinate or help inform education and training, which is really a provincial mandated activity, in a way that everybody's kind of moving in the same direction to support where the national sectors need them to move. So hopefully some of this interprovincial trade barrier work and breaking down some of these silos or walls that might be between provinces will trickle into the training and education side of things as well. Christina, what are your thoughts around the policy perspective?
I think there's already been some opportunities for us to provide input and that we've done through the Workforce Strategic Plan. One example was that consultation around that new foreign labor program for primary ag as well as for fish, fruit, and vegetable processing, which it was great to be able to use this as a forum to bring people together just to share our thoughts on the questions. It's my understanding that we'll probably see next steps over the summer in that consultation too, so that'll be another opportunity. At the same time, that consultation really helped point out what was missing from it, which was some of the other occupations in food and beverage manufacturing. So it certainly offered an opportunity for us to do some policy work and engagement with the federal government as well. We know that, as an example, we now have a dedicated federal minister for artificial intelligence, which is quite new to us. I think we'll see as he begins his work where his priorities are, where we can begin to feed into those policy discussions as well. Obviously, we've had it's a change in government, but it's the really some new faces, but same government. But I do think that we're seeing this as a government that does things differently in the fall when we see a budget, when we see some of those big announcements come out, there will be opportunities for us to provide that policy commentary, I'd say, and begin to really bring the learnings from this exercise and move them forward with the federal government. And I think some of that's also with FPTs, so with the provincial governments as well.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. And we've just focused our conversation around a lot of policy work in the federal government and the new federal kind of landscape and that type of thing. But I'd also, one of the big things for the National Workforce Strategic Plan is to bring all the stakeholders to the table, share that information, amplify what's working, really foster collaboration, all that kind of thing. So if we turn, to another stakeholder and think, what role outside of what we're kind of already doing with the Workforce Strategic Plan, what role do you think industry and employers can play in moving us forward with some of these priorities? Christina, I'll start with you this time.
I think what we saw a lot of is we need to identify as an industry, especially when we're talking to the government about labor programs or funding that we need or training, what are those skills that we're looking at? And it came up in a lot of our conversations, but I think there is some work as employers who can be able to speak. I can only speak from the food and beverage manufacturing side of things, but the skills you need for someone working at a meat plant is very different than the skills you need for someone working in dairy. But
Yeah.
some of those skills beyond the obvious of working with AI, where we might see some of those skills overlap with each other, we need to do a better job at identifying those skills and being able to articulate to the government as part of these policy discussions on AI, on the temporary foreign worker program, etc. So I think there's some work for industry and employers to do, again, in collaboration through forums like this to move forward some of that work as well.
Excellent. Yeah,
Yeah.
and go ahead, Brody.
Well, I was just going to build off of that. That was really how I was going to answer that question too, Jen. I mean, we talked, one of the things that came up in the summit was this need for a sort of a skills gap map,
Hmm.
for lack of a better word, really mapping where those gaps are. And that's the information that the government of Canada needs, because they don't, it's very difficult. Like if you flip, and sit on the other side of the table, if you're trying to build programming to meet the needs of the sector, you need to have a very clear understanding of the problem you're trying to solve. And in order to do that, you need the data. And They will have some fairly strong data sources through like job vacancy wage surveys and things like that, but really do need to hear from the employer community, from industry, about what their needs are, not just now, but what their needs are going to be in the future, because they're the ones who are actually dealing with some of those challenges on the work site from a day-to-day perspective.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I know through this initiative, we have started some of that skills gap analysis, some of looking at, the impact of digitalization, automation, technology on skills that we have now and jobs that we have now and going forward. Things are changing so quickly with AI, but, AI is a big term, and it doesn't necessarily mean that, depending on what type of AI you're talking about, it's not going to replace every job in agriculture, for example. It's change and it's bringing sensors into food and beverage manufacturing. It's bringing more data into agriculture. It's changing some of the things that we do, but it's not necessarily where changing the jobs. It's changing what the people in the jobs might need to do, some of the knowledge that they might need to have, their ability to have digital literacy and do data analytics and understand the data, all this data that they're getting, but it doesn't necessarily replace them. So, we have started a little bit of that work. There is a lot more work to do there, and we're hoping to get some funding to be able to do that early in the fall. Food Processing Skills Canada has also, started quite a bit of work on that skills gap. But like you say, we need to, get in there a bit more, get more clarity on exactly where it's going, and make sure that we're tracking that information in a real-time basis because it is changing fairly quickly. On that front as well, and one thing also I would just chime into, I guess, on the employer side is, um, having the openness to bringing in new people and training them, and looking, there's lots of great programs out there that provide wage subsidies and help mitigate some of that cost, but not being afraid to train your employees and not being afraid that if you train them, they're going to leave. There's the old adage that what if you don't train them and they stay? You want to keep your business moving forward as well. You want to retain the workers that you have. There's a lot less um, cost in training and retaining than there is in constantly having turnover and looking for new employees and then getting them up to speed and that kind of thing. So employers can really play, I think, a keen role in that. But also, so can post-secondary institutions, colleges, universities, training institutions. We saw a lot of examples at the summit of some of the work that's happening there and how they're better connecting directly with employers to get their students in the workplace, but also learn from employers what they need from a skill perspective so they can react a little bit more quickly. So I would love, again, the perspective of both of you from what you heard at the summit, but also from what you're hearing from your industry partners on that role that post-secondary and training institutions can play as we bring all of this together.
I can start on that one if you'd like.
Sure.
So first of all, I'm going to go back to something that you acknowledged earlier in this session, Jen. It's the jurisdictional dilemma that we face a little bit. And as an national organization who predominantly deals with, our interlocutor is the federal government, we don't typically deal with or weigh in on a lot of provincial educational sort of issues or institutions. However, I'm going to introduce a sort of a corollary subject here, which I think is very relevant. Extension work. So I think in Canada we have a sort of an interesting history of the way we've dealt with agricultural extension services. We, in the sort of 70s, 80s, 90s, had a fairly traditional extension network, which included a hefty-ish level of capacity in the provincial educational, post-secondary institutions, where they would actually get out, to meet with industry on their terms, on their turf, to provide some support for, traditional agricultural practices. So, adoption of no-till or supporting crop rotations or introduction of cover crops and that sort of stuff. As a result of budget pressures through the kind of early to mid 90s, that all got stripped way back. And so it just doesn't exist in the same way in the provinces and in the post-secondary education institutions across the country that it did before. There are still research facilities. Think about Ridgetank campus, for example, from the University of Guelph. There are others across Canada, but they're more place-based and sort of static in where they're attached. So the idea there is like the farmers have to go to them rather than them going to farmers to kind of disseminate that information. That is something that I think needs to and will change in the future. And I think sort of bringing this full circle to technology adoption is going to be the potential solution in that space. And so I'm not necessarily sure that this is an area where CAHRC or the National Workforce Strategic Plan specifically needs to get involved, although I do think that there's a role around, workforce development and training. But we need to look at technology, so new AI extension, tools, for example, to try and reintroduce those principles of how to best support farmers on their farms with the adoption of new techniques and technologies to support their productivity objectives. And I think that's also a solution to sort of revive a conversation around how to better use agricultural extension services.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, that's a great example, especially of where, um, you know, typically the institutions are where the work is happening and where, it's easier access for producers and for agriculture and food and beverage organizations as well to access and have that direct regional connection as well. So I agree with what you're saying there. Christina, from a food and beverage manufacturing perspective, and knowing what you know from our work that we've done together, but also from what your members are saying and some of the institutions that you work with as well. What are you seeing the role for post-secondary institutions and other training organizations to play in this capacity?
So I know that there are a lot of stakeholders involved in the Workforce Strategic Plan with access to the provincial governments and access to education institutes. And it'd be great if we can get to a place where we have something that it's easy for them to take, digest, and bring to those officials to really begin to start that conversation, recognizing it. We're working on a lot of this from the federal side of things, but there is that jurisdictional issue, and there's more that can be done on the provincial side of things as well. I think in terms of careers awareness, it would be great if employers in food and beverage manufacturing could find a way to get further involved with post-secondary institutions with opportunities like Careers Now that's taking place in Ontario, that's with Food and Beverage Ontario, things like that, so we can really begin to promote careers in our industry, the skills that we're looking for, how like the working conditions, really how we can compete with some of these other industries like auto in terms of some of the neat jobs that we have as well. Like I do think there's a role for employers and for industry to play in that also.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I know, some of the work that we've been doing through our workforce, our growing opportunities, which is wage subsidy program for post-secondary students. We've been really focusing on connecting in with post-secondary institutions that have programs not necessarily specific to agriculture, getting the students connected with work experience while they're in their post-secondary. They can see how they can apply their biology degree, their software engineering degree, their environmental science degree, whatever it might be in agriculture. And I know on the food and beverage manufacturing side, Food Processing Skills Canada is doing the exact same thing with that same wage subsidy program. So those type of things as well can really help make those connections. And what we're seeing is it doesn't just help connect the student with the industry, it helps build better relationships between the industry and the employers and the institutions themselves and opens up dialogue and conversation and that kind of thing too, which I think is very important. Um, time is moving right along here. It's 1:45, but I thought I would just ask one more question to both of you before we open it up to any questions that might be from participants in the webinar. So we've had all this great work. We're over 4 years into it. A great dialogue, great conversation, lots of people coming to the table. You know, yes, funding helps this work, but we're very committed, obviously, to continuing and moving it forward. Where do you see kind of the priorities and the next steps and actions for this initiative to support all the things that we've just talked about? Christina, I'll start with you this time.
I think we need to begin to engage more like we did 2 weeks ago. So not just in those siloed working groups, but really bringing everyone together to have these discussions. I think it's helpful when people also have homework first to do before we get to these discussions, especially when we're talking about things like what are those skills, like a place that we can come together, having already done some of the work to begin to move some of those conversations forward. And I think there will be a role for us to make sure that we're making sure that government and the work that they're doing on workforce and skills is going in tandem with what we're doing too. We actually saw last spring, it was the Minister of Employment who had a Workforce Summit. And we were all invited and we participated in that. And we're probably going to see more initiatives like that as well. So, how do we make sure that they're aware of everything that's taking place as part of this exercise too, and they're taking into consideration as they develop policy?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Brody, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we're at a kind of crucial moment in time right now. This government is, like I said earlier, very ambitious. They're at the beginning of a new mandate in trying to sort of structure, some of the priority areas. I think there's a lot of programs that are in flux right now, including the temporary foreign worker program. Christina alluded to a pretty broad-based consultation that's underway right now on restructuring that program. There's also and I always call it this, it's not the right name, but the future of the sector council program. And like there are a number of kind of the agri-food pilot is another one, which supports a lot more, pathways to permanent residency for temporary workers, migrant workers. So there are a number of these kind of key HR related, workforce development related, labor related programs that are in flux right now. And so we need to come in with a very clear articulation of the advantage of pursuing a multi-pronged approach like the National Workforce Strategic Plan, and some sense of direction and a plan under each of those pillars on how we're going to actually implement them and the role of the stakeholders involved. And then I think getting everybody aligned on that and supporting a similar sort of advocacy strategy for those who do advocacy, not all of us do, I think is going to be really critical, but we need to do it kind of now-ish. I think the clock is definitely ticking. And unless we're in there able to articulate the value and the role of these types of strategies and the importance of them, decisions are going to be made without us and without our input. And they're probably going to be made sooner rather than later, like by this fall when the government has their fall economic statement and or potentially an early budget. So I think it's good timing. I agree with Christina that setting up future sessions like the one we had in Toronto a couple of weeks ago are very useful in sort of following through on that facilitation and convening function, I think, that CAHRC and others play through the National Workforce Strategic Plan. But we need to get some clarity in terms of our recommended directions here, and then we need to start getting in and making sure that those are heard.
Yeah, and I think that it really, kind of brings us really nicely into those next steps of, we've talked about the significant amount of work that's been done by the working groups and identifying actions and priorities and measuring where we've moved in the first 4 years on those initial actions and priorities, but where we are today. And certainly our focus in leading this initiative over the next month really will be ensuring that the most current priorities from all of the working groups and all of the areas are brought forward, and that we're distilling it in a way that us as leaders of this initiative, but also everyone else across industry has some very tangible things that they can put forward when they're, talking about workforce development in their own, whether it be advocacy or priority setting, whatever it might be. So definitely, look for that to come from this initiative going forward over the summer as well, because you're both absolutely right. The time is now. Things are, moving fairly quickly, and we need to ensure that we don't get lost in what is already a lot of other activity and a lot of other focus around construction and defense, and that type of thing as well. So that will definitely be a priority moving forward. I know we have a hard stop at 1 o'clock, but we do have a few minutes. We could take a question or two. There's already one question in the Q&A box that's focused on the fact that, yeah, there are a lot of Canadian startups trying to solve the labor problem through digitalization, AI, robotics. And how can we ensure that those folks are part of this process, that we're having partnerships and that type of thing as well. So certainly, this really aligns well with the spirit of the initiative that we have here, where, as Brody and Christina have mentioned, we're the real conveners of a lot of this work. We're really trying to, you know, identify some of the stuff that's happening and not duplicate efforts, but really amplify it and to be able to bring forward some of the great work that's already happening and help make connections between the ones that might have some things already underway and other stakeholders that need those solutions. So, we'll be continuing to foster those type of partnerships, foster those type of engagements so that we can continue to build awareness of the work that's happening there for sure. Any other questions
I see a question in the chat, Jen, which I'd be
in the
happy
chat?
to
Okay,
answer,
perfect. Yep,
from Mark Chambers,
yep,
who very correctly raised that there was in fact a workforce-specific priority outlined in that list of 7 priorities for the Government of Canada right now, related to attracting the best talent in the world to help build our economy while returning our overall immigration rates to sustainable levels. So the comment or question here is, well, what are the implications of that, and what does it mean in terms of the best talent? So Mark or others, it's very difficult to know exactly what was meant by some of the choice selection of some words in a mandate commitment like that. We have put in a request, but haven't had a chance to meet with both the ministers of jobs and immigration, where we'll certainly ask that. I have had some conversations with the minister's office staff, who have assured me that when they talk about bringing overall immigration rates to sustainable levels, it's not necessarily a target on the agriculture streams linked to the temporary foreign worker program. That their interpretation of the direction that's being set from the Prime Minister's office is, this is really more about housing sustainability and housing supply. And so it's very much a continuation of the tightening cycle that we've seen on the temporary foreign worker program on the low wage stream in particular, and in particular regions and sectors of the economy. So a lot more focus on sort of retail, for example, and in urban centers. When they reference high best talent in the world, again, I don't know. In all honesty, I can't answer that with any sort of 100% certainty. My interpretation of that choice of language at this particular time is that it's a signal to a lot of the folks south of the border who are not necessarily feeling comfortable or secure in their careers. And it's a bit of a reverse brain drain attempt to try and bring as many of those skilled workers and highly educated folks into the Canadian economy to support our economic and competitiveness objectives. That's my interpretation. Again, I can't say with any certainty that that's actually what's behind it, but the timing of that choice of language leads me to believe that there may be something to that.
Christina, do you have any comments to that?
I'd maybe comment on the agri-food pilot mentioned in the chat. I will know
Yeah.
that we were disappointed with the ending of it as well, and it is something that we've worked with other stakeholders, like the Canadian Meat Council as an example, to ask for it to come back. We're doing a lot of work as to what programs did work for us, where there's gaps in programming, whether it's the provincial nominee program, the agri-food pilot, to really be able to articulate to the federal government the gap in available access to labor with the closure of some of those programs, including the egg food pilot. So it's something that we're still working on. They haven't seemed willing to reopen it. I think it would just require a change in direction with a new federal government, a new minister, but certainly something that we're aware of the impacts of.
Great, thanks so much. We're really bumping up to the hour here, so just wanted to summarize and say that, I think what we're seeing through the Workforce Strategic Plan is a really great, positive, industry-led initiative where we are looking at ensuring that our agriculture and food and beverage manufacturing sectors are increasing productivity, adopting AI technology, digitalization, all those great things, providing very secure career opportunities, well-paying career opportunities, and that through this initiative, we're able to bring everybody to the table, foster that collaboration, and really, as they say, raise all tide, or what's the saying now? I shouldn't even try to say the saying, but all boats rise better together than trying to do this apart. So, and I think that, as both Brody and Christina have mentioned, there are some challenges, but I think we look at those as opportunities and we take, move forward in a way that we bring agriculture and food and beverage manufacturing to the forefront as a leader in technology, a leader in AI, and, a great place for work to be done and to have careers and that type of thing. So as we move forward, as we mentioned, we will be doing a lot more work over the summer to get those priorities and actions out and communicated. We do continue to share our research and knowledge mobilization of what we've learned and to look for opportunities to bring people together and to collaborate. So stay tuned for more of that. If you're interested in the other webinars, please visit our website. All of these webinars have been recorded and are available to go back and listen to later. And we'll also be releasing just a brief summary report of our summit as well. So if you haven't been involved in this initiative in the past and you want to, by all means, feel free to reach out to us as well. This, as we said, is about bringing everybody together and moving forward together. So thank you again to Christina and to Brody, to Food and Beverage Canada, and to CFA for your constant support, to the Future Skills Center for the funding and belief in the work that we're doing. It's all very much appreciated and looking forward to our next steps. With that, everyone, have a great rest of your weekend and a great long weekend as we move into Canada Day. Thanks, everyone.